Hello, my name is Lumen, and on my birthday, my family gave me a cake that said, "Congrats, loser." My parents laughed, my brother waved the house keys like they were holding my life in their hands, and just like that, I walked out. But only 3 days later, they were begging me for help. How could the people who mocked me, erased me from my grandmother's will, and tried to steal my life expect me to trust them again? What would you do if the people who were supposed to love you treated you like you didn't exist? The sun had barely peeked through the overcast sky when I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house in San Antonio. Late May had always carried that dry heat that clung to your skin like regret, and yet I still wore a pale blue dress, my favorite color, hopeful it might soften their eyes this year. I parked behind Cressida's brand new Range Rover. Of course, nothing changed. The house was the same dull beige with peeling shutters from my childhood, but the backyard echoed with laughter. Balloons danced lazily in the breeze, and the scent of barbecue drifted through the fence. From the sound of it, everyone was already there. I adjusted my gift bag. Inside was a framed photo I'd restored of Grandma Josie holding me on my 5th birthday. A piece of warmth I thought they'd appreciate. I walked in through the side gate. Mom caught my eye first. She didn't shout happy birthday, or even smile. She gave a slight nod, eyes scanning me from head to toe as if taking inventory of my dress, my shoes, the fact that I hadn't worn makeup. "Lumen's here," she announced without inflection, like someone noting a late delivery. There were about 15 people, some cousins, neighbors, my Aunt Teresa. Cressida was already sipping a mimosa, perched on a lounge chair like she owned the place. Dad stood by the grill, flipping burgers half-heartedly. He didn't look up. Not until the cake came out. It was one of those big sheet cakes from the grocery store, white frosting, bright red piping, and words scrawled in loud block letters across the top. "Congrats, loser!" For a second, I didn't even register it was meant for me. My stomach dropped, but I forced a laugh, thinking, maybe it's for someone else. Maybe this was a weird inside joke I wasn't in on. Then Mom clapped her hands. "Happy birthday, sweetie! Thought we'd celebrate your unique path in life." Laughter erupted. Cressida nearly spit out her drink. Uncle Mark chuckled from behind his sunglasses and muttered, "She always had a flair for underachievement." I stood frozen. The cake sat there like a dare. I didn't touch it. The only thing I could do was blink. My fingers clutched the gift bag tighter. The plastic handle dug into my palm. "You get it, right?" Cressida chimed in, sauntering over with that tight grin she'd worn since high school. "It's just a joke." Come on, don't be so sensitive." And then she did it. She reached into her purse, pulled out the family house keys, the ones I used to have my own copy of, and twirled them on her finger before tossing them up and catching them with a smug flare. "Guess these aren't yours anymore," she said, and everyone laughed again, like it was scripted. My legs didn't move. My heart felt like it had been dunked in ice water. I searched for one face in that crowd, just one person who might look uncomfortable, who might not be in on this sick ritual. But even Aunt Teresa smirked, shaking her head like I was the butt of a long-standing joke. I turned slowly, walking back toward the side gate. I didn't say a word. No dramatic exit, no accusations, no slammed doors. I just left the gift bag on the picnic table. No one stopped me. Not even Mom. The only sound I heard as I closed the gate behind me was Cressida's voice floating above the music. "She'll be back. She always comes crawling back." In the car, I gripped the steering wheel. The gift I'd spent hours restoring now sat abandoned, just like me. My eyes didn't water, not then. They burned. But tears? No. I wasn't going to cry for people who'd made a sport out of diminishing me. I drove aimlessly at first, through familiar streets that no longer felt like home. Past my old elementary school, the corner store where I once helped my dad tally receipts, the church where we used to sit in silence pretending to be a normal family, and somewhere between the red light on Jefferson and the Dairy Queen sign blinking its specials, it hit me. They don't love me, not the way love is supposed to be. Not with kindness, not with respect, and certainly not with acknowledgement of the years I spent holding that damn family together. When Mom had her surgery, who dropped out of college to take care of her? Me. When Dad needed someone to run the store while he recovered from his drinking episode? Who stepped in while Cressida went backpacking in Europe? Me. When the mortgage was 3 months late, who quietly paid it off with her savings? Me. Always me. And yet, I was the loser. I drove to my small apartment on the east side of town, the one-bedroom place with creaky floors and peeling paint, but it was mine. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and sat on the couch without turning on the lights. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long orange shadows through the blinds. I sat there for hours. They didn't call. They didn't text. Not even a passive-aggressive voicemail from Mom. I finally lay in bed sometime after midnight, still in my dress, staring at the ceiling fan that clicked with every rotation. There was a kind of silence that settles into your bones when you realize you were never really seen, not truly. That night, I didn't sleep. I played the scene over and over in my mind. The laughter, the keys, the cake. Something broke in me, but not in a way that made me weaker. No, it felt like the first crack of something stronger emerging from beneath. I must have dozed off somewhere around 5 a.m., still wearing that wrinkled blue dress. The blinds didn't keep out the gray morning light creeping into my apartment, and when I blinked awake, it felt like no time had passed at all. I hadn't planned to sleep. My body just gave out. The first thing I heard was the buzz of my phone. Repeated. Insistent. A rhythm of urgency I tried to ignore. Voicemail. 3 missed calls. 5 messages. All from numbers I knew by heart, though I never saved them under names. I didn't touch the phone at first. I stayed still, curled into the corner of the couch, arms folded across my chest, as if to hold something inside. My apartment smelled like old coffee and lavender detergent. Familiar. Mine. Safe. Until it wasn't. When the buzzing started again, something in me clicked. Not curiosity, not concern, just inevitability. I reached for the phone and flipped it over. The first thing I saw was a link. No caption, just a link from an unknown number. I clicked it, and there it was. My face, distorted by bad lighting and a too-close camera angle. My voice, barely audible over the background music and laughter. My expression, awkward, confused, trying to smile, trying to not cry. The text across the screen read, "She really thought we cared." Laughing emojis flashed in bright yellow. The sound effect of a toilet flushing played underneath my audio. A second clip followed, Cressida wrapping an arm around me, her face hidden from me but perfectly visible to the camera she'd positioned behind my back. She was smirking, like a smug director watching her masterpiece unfold. Then came my brother's voice. "This'll go viral for sure." And it had, over 2,000 views. Comments like, "Is this real? Families are wild." I'd disown myself too, LOL. Poor thing. Or maybe she deserves it. I sat frozen. My heartbeat wasn't racing. It was slow. Heavy. Like it was counting the seconds I'd wasted, believing I still mattered to them. I tossed the phone across the couch. Not in anger, yet. Just disbelief. I stood, crossed the room, and opened my laptop. My fingers moved faster than my thoughts. Screenshot. Username. Timestamp. I saved everything. Every repost, every like, every name. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear dropped onto the keyboard. I wiped it away with the sleeve of my dress, the same one I'd worn yesterday, the same one I now hated. And that's when it hit me. That hug from Cressida. The one brief second when I thought she might actually be sorry, or at least human. That had been the setup, the shot, a performance, for laughs. It was all a joke, and I was the punchline. I thought back to every moment I had doubted my gut, every time I told myself I was overreacting, like when my private texts with my ex ended up quoted during a family dinner, or when they all laughed about Lumen's big dreams while clinking glasses at Thanksgiving, and I smiled along, pretending it was good-natured ribbing. They never respected me. They just tolerated me, for sport, for content. Jesus, I muttered, staring at the ceiling like some divine answer might fall from it. What the hell is wrong with them? But I already knew. Cressida always needed an audience. She couldn't stand silence unless it was filled with admiration. And my brother? He once told me, deadpan, "You're only useful when you're quiet." Back then, I thought he meant I was good in a crisis. Now I saw it for what it was: dismissal masked as flattery. The phone buzzed again. I ignored it. I went to the kitchen, poured myself stale coffee from the pot I hadn't cleaned in 2 days, took one sip, grimaced, and poured the rest down the sink. The silence of the apartment was no longer comforting. It was sharp, echoing with things I didn't want to hear. Around noon, I pulled on jeans and a hoodie, tied my hair back, and walked the 3 blocks to my part-time cafe job. It wasn't a glamorous gig, but it paid the rent and gave me just enough structure to feel like I wasn't drifting. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was off. My manager, Kelly, was waiting by the counter. "Hey, Lumen," she started, cautious, like she'd practiced the tone. "Can we talk for a second?" I nodded. She led me to the back room, away from the espresso machines and idle gossip. "Look, I don't usually get into personal stuff, but someone showed me a video this morning, and it's going around." She didn't need to say more. "I'm not mad," she added quickly. Maybe take a day or two off. Clear your head?" I nodded again, more out of reflex than agreement. Back at my apartment, I opened the fridge, stared at a container of leftover pasta, and shut the door. I wasn't hungry. I pulled the magnet off the photo of my family that had been stuck on my fridge since I moved in. The photo was taken 4 years ago, Thanksgiving. Cressida had forced everyone into that group pose. I'd worn a burgundy sweater. I remembered feeling invisible that day, too. I crumpled the photo and threw it in the trash. Then I opened my phone. I deleted the family group chat without reading the messages. I blocked Cressida. I blocked my brother. I even blocked my mom, though it took a second longer. That evening, just as the sky started turning that hazy shade of orange, my phone lit up again. No name, just a blocked number. I hesitated and opened the message. "You think you're better than us? Stay gone." No punctuation, no signature, just malice. I stared at the screen. No anger this time, just resolve. Because if they thought this would scare me back into silence, they were wrong. I wasn't crawling back. Not this time. I returned home late that morning, soaking wet from sudden rain. My shoes left puddles on the hardwood floor. I dropped my backpack by the front door and couldn't remember ever feeling so hollow. After yesterday's message, from a blocked number, full of threats, I couldn't just pretend the walls around me weren't closing in. And just like that, I knew I had to look deeper. There was more they were hiding. That afternoon, I sat in the small public library on Houston Street. Rain pattered against the windows, sounding like sorrow with rhythm. I opened my laptop, hands trembling, because every file I clicked on felt like stepping into a trap. I typed, "Josie Monroe will probate" into the search bar. Dead grandmother, property in her estate, everything that had been spoken of in hushed tones. Nothing showed up with my name on it. The library quiet was thick, punctured only by distant coughs and printer hums. I flipped through public records, death certificate, name of executor, dates, and then wills. I saw a will dated 2 months before Grandma died. No mention of me, but I swear I saw her handwriting once. Something that said I'd be taken care of even if everyone forgot. I closed my laptop. Head felt heavy. I recalled Grandma's last hug, warm and brief, before she whispered in my ear, "Don't let them decide your worth." Warm, because she believed in me. Promise, because I believed that too. That evening, I called a lawyer that Grandma had once mentioned in passing. I almost didn't recognize the address. Her office had moved. The receptionist let me leave a message. And then, early the next morning, he called back. When I walked into his office, a musty smell of leather and old books hit me. The man, Mr. Hayes, looked older than I remembered. Coffee rings on his desk, pictures of family on the wall, kind eyes. He slid a folder across for me to see. "The name Lumen Monroe was on the first draft of your grandmother's will," he said quietly. "But about a week before it was submitted to probate, there was a revised version. Your name was removed. The revised version lists someone else as witness, Cressida Monroe." My throat tightened, but my voice stayed even. "You're telling me Grandma changed it?" He nodded. "Or someone made it so she couldn't leave it as it was. This is unusual. Unusual to hide notices from a beneficiary. Unusual to replace a will under these conditions without informing everyone listed. Lightning flashed outside. I watched shadows dance across his window. After the rain passed, I asked, "Then why did Grandma tell me I'd be taken care of?" His silence answered that. I drove to my mother's apartment later that day, streets still damp, gasoline smell mixing with wet asphalt. My mother answered, looking surprised to see me. Her eyes shifted. Guilt? Resentment? I couldn't tell. "Mom," I said, close but controlled. "Grandma's will. Lumen's name was there. You know it was." She stiffened, pursed her lips. "You always imagine slights, Lumen," she said, in that voice she used when she meant to soothe, but ended up patronizing. "We love you, just in our way." I didn't cry. I had cried enough in the dark. I said, "Loving someone doesn't mean rewriting their last wishes so you can claim the story." The words floated in the air between us, stinging. She looked away. Her voice dropped. "It was too complicated. You weren't involved." "Maybe Grandma didn't trust me to be invisible anymore," I said. I stood, turned, and walked out without waiting for a response. No apologies, no delay, just the weight of truth pulling me forward. Night came, and I wrote in my journal by candlelight, because the power flickered and then went out. My pen scratched its way over the paper. They've taken my time, my effort, my name. They won't take my story. Each word burned with betrayal. On my desk, I rummaged through old boxes, found photos, especially that one. Grandma and me, her arm around my shoulder, her smile soft, eyes bright. I cleaned off the frame I'd stashed away, put the photo inside, placed it on my small desk facing the window, letting moonlight fall on it. When the clock hit midnight, I dragged myself from bed to check the front door. Something had been slipped in. Envelope under the door, cream-colored with no return address. My heart thumped. I opened it carefully. Inside, the original will, typed version. Grandma's signature and mine listed as a beneficiary. Words I had longed to see. I pressed the paper to my chest. It felt unreal, safe, powerful. But I didn't have time to savor victory. A knock at the door, soft, hesitant. I opened it just enough to see Cressida standing there, umbrella dripping, eyes fierce. "You think you found the truth," she said, voice low. "Truth is whatever people believe, and believe me, no one's going to listen to what I say." Her eyes glinted. I braced myself. I woke up 2 days after receiving that envelope, the rain still lingering over San Antonio like a weight pressing down on the streets. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls echoing with the silence left by the morning storm. As I made my coffee, my fingers shook slightly while I scrolled through notifications. One caught my eye immediately, an email from the family company. Subject line, "Celebrating our growth, spotlight on leadership." My stomach twisted. I opened it. There it was, a slick, polished video that painted a picture of family success. Happy employees, smiling customers, charts rising, all underscored by light piano music. And at the center, Cressida, bathed in soft sunlight, speaking about leadership, commitment, and the team effort. Every achievement she mentioned, every store expansion, every customer testimonial, it was my work. My nights spent balancing ledgers, my hands keeping track of inventory, my proposals to modernize the system. It was hers now. The camera lingered on her face, her smile the same one she used when she caught me off guard at birthdays, when she reveled in my discomfort. And then came her line, casually, as if the entire universe had always revolved around her. "This family gave me everything. I'm just giving it back." I closed my eyes and felt the heat crawl up my neck. Disbelief, anger, rage that simmered beneath my skin. I wanted to scream, to grab my phone and call the world to attention. "No, you don't get to erase me." But instead, I inhaled, trying to center myself. I had learned that raw emotion was a tool only if wielded strategically. Acting hastily would give them more ammunition, and I refused. By late morning, I had my laptop open again. This time, I logged into my bank account, the same account linked to the family business, a small savings account meant to keep my earnings from years of effort. Heart in my throat, I scanned the balance. Gone. $40,000 missing, not a penny of warning, not a note in the ledger. My stomach sank, but my mind clicked into motion. Shared management access had been documented, signed by Cressida, and approved by my father. She had systematically erased my contributions, financial and professional, and the family had facilitated it. The enormity of the betrayal wrapped around me like a vice. I could taste the metallic tang of fury. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I copied every document, every video, every transaction, printing hard copies, saving screenshots, compiling everything into digital folders. Then, I bought a small locked box, the kind used for keepsakes. I labeled it boldly, in black marker. Truth. I filled it carefully, meticulously, like an archivist preserving a history someone wanted erased. Each file placed inside felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Around mid-afternoon, I ventured out to a nearby cafe where I had worked part-time during college. Sitting at the same table by the window, watching pedestrians scurry along the rain-slick streets, I opened the company video again. I created a burner account and left a comment, innocuous yet pointed. Funny, I remember someone else running that store 6 days a week. Nothing aggressive, no direct accusations, but enough to plant a seed. The comment got likes almost immediately before disappearing entirely. Someone had seen it. Someone had noticed the cracks in the narrative. And for the first time in days, a small flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe I wasn't entirely invisible. The sun began to dip lower, throwing golden light across the wooden tables of the cafe. The warmth, almost deceptive, contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts swirling in my head. I considered calling a friend, but I wanted no distractions. This required focus. If I acted impulsively, if I told anyone else too soon, Cressida and the others would cover their tracks again. I needed patience. By early evening, I had organized the digital and paper trail into a system. Categorical folders, chronological order, timestamps, and metadata, all mapped carefully. Each document a potential dagger to reveal the truth when the time was right. I looked at my reflection in the cafe window. Rain had passed, leaving glistening puddles on the streets, but my eyes reflected a storm that was only beginning. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. A low voice murmured, "If you want the real audit report, meet me Tuesday. Don't tell them you're coming." And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, gripping it tightly. My pulse quickened, not out of fear, but because a piece of the puzzle had just appeared. An ally? A whistleblower? Or another trap? I couldn't know yet. But I did know this. I wasn't walking in as a victim anymore. The city lights flickered on outside, casting long shadows across the cafe walls. I packed my laptop, tucking the USB drives and printed pages into a slim bag. Each step back to my car was measured, deliberate. The air was damp, carrying the faint scent of ozone from the earlier storm. My hand brushed over the keys as I unlocked the door, each motion grounding me, centering me, preparing me for whatever awaited on Tuesday. On the drive home, I passed familiar streets, the corner where I bought my first notebook for the business, the bridge I used to cross with Grandma's hand guiding me, the small park where I'd sat and planned expansions for the family store late into the night. Every memory reminded me not just of what they'd taken, but of what I had built with my own sweat, intelligence, and dedication. And now, I would make sure the world saw it too. Arriving at my apartment, I carefully placed the truth box on the floor next to my desk, beside the framed photo of Grandma. The juxtaposition of legacy and betrayal stared at me like twin sentinels. My apartment had never felt smaller, yet it held more power than the family mansion ever did. I sank into my chair, letting my fingers run over the edges of the box. Calm, collected, aware. I was ready. Outside, the sky deepened into indigo. Rain had long since stopped, leaving a silent city behind, but my heart was thrumming with a plan. For the first time in weeks, the chaos around me felt manageable. Every step had been calculated, every observation recorded, Every slight, public and private, logged. They had underestimated me, as they always did. Tomorrow, I would begin to trace the missing funds, uncover who else in their circle was complicit. And every revelation would bring me closer to reclaiming not just money or recognition, but dignity and justice. The diner smelled faintly of fried onions and coffee, a scent that usually made me feel comforted, but today seemed sharper, almost bitter. I slid into a booth by the window, the warm light cutting through the rainy evening, and placed the folder and flash drive from the accountant on the table. The street outside glistened with wet asphalt, reflections of neon signs dancing in the puddles. I could feel the tension in my shoulders, but I straightened up, inhaling slowly. There would be no tremors, no hesitation, not tonight. Across from me, the former accountant, an older woman named Eleanor, watched me carefully. She had worked for my grandmother for years, the kind of person who had seen every family squabble, every attempt at deception. Her expression was grave but compassionate, as if she understood the weight of the history I was now holding in my hands. She placed a cup of black coffee in front of me without a word. I didn't ask for sugar. I didn't want any distractions from the stark reality I was facing. Opening the folder, I scanned the pages. Side-by-side comparisons of documents, notarized and time-stamped. My name, my rightful claims to family assets, was erased in the altered versions. There was no question. Signatures forged, a system in place to cover tracks, and the deliberate intention to remove me from inheritance. My stomach twisted with a mix of revulsion and a growing sense of resolve. Eleanor's whisper broke the silence. She wanted you protected. They didn't. The flash drive held video footage, scanned documents, and email threads between family members. I could hear the echoes of their casual cruelty in the metadata, the timestamps showing deliberate coordination. This wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. And now, the time for passive observation had ended. I left the diner, carrying the folder like a shield, stepping carefully into the cool Texas night. Rain had softened into a mist that clung to the streets, and my car's tires hissed against the wet asphalt. I drove to Monica Reyes's office, a legal aid center tucked into a quiet street near the outskirts of Austin. Monica, a seasoned estate lawyer in her mid-50s, greeted me with an understanding nod. She had defended women wronged by families like mine, families who hid behind appearances and manipulated legacies to their advantage. I laid out the evidence meticulously, explaining every observation, every suspicion, every subtle detail that could point to fraud. Monica leaned back in her chair, then leaned forward, her eyes locking with mine. "You're not imagining this," she said firmly. "You've been wronged. Let's make sure it's corrected." Her words were a balm and a spark at the same time. No pity, no judgment, just acknowledgement and readiness for action. I swallowed hard, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Thank you for believing me." We began strategizing quietly. Monica explained the process of filing injunctions, conducting audits, and verifying the authenticity of the documents. She emphasized the importance of subtlety. We couldn't alert the family prematurely. Every move had to be deliberate, precise, and above all, legal. I listened, my pen tracing the edges of my planner as I wrote, "Rebuilding isn't revenge, it's justice." This sentence, so simple, became a mantra, a guiding principle. The next morning, I returned to San Antonio to visit my childhood home. The familiar streets carried memories of summer nights and whispered confidences, of birthdays celebrated in quiet hope and years of giving more than I ever received. The house loomed as it always had, grand in stature, suffocating in control. I stepped inside, folder in hand, determined to confront the patriarch of the family, my father. He looked at me with surprise, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but I didn't waver. I placed the documents on the kitchen counter, the flash drive glinting under the chandelier's light. "You think loyalty is silence?" I said, my voice even but firm. "I think it's truth." The words cut through the air, a quiet thunder that filled the room. He opened his mouth, but I held up the flash drive. "This time, I have receipts." He faltered, the weight of the evidence pressing down. My mother hovered behind him, a mask of calm that didn't reach her eyes. I could see the cogs turning, the calculation of how to spin this, how to manipulate the narrative in their favor. But I had anticipated every angle, every expected reaction. My quiet stance was a strategy, a shield. The documents weren't just proof, they were leverage, a tangible assertion that the past could no longer be rewritten without consequence. Back in my apartment that evening, I spread the folder on the kitchen table, the flash drive connected to my laptop. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, a gentle reminder of the storm I had weathered and the one I was now orchestrating. Monica called. "They know we've filed. They're panicking." Her voice carried a quiet satisfaction, a recognition that the first tremors of accountability were beginning. I leaned back, letting the weight of the moment settle. I was no longer the quiet observer, the invisible participant in my family's narrative. I had transformed that invisibility into a shield and a weapon. And in that transformation, I found clarity, patience, precision, and unwavering focus. I checked the ledger of correspondence one last time for the day, noting anomalies, cross-referencing names, and plotting the next steps. Each discovery reinforced my determination. Each proof of wrongdoing strengthened my resolve. The quiet vengeance I sought was not about theatrics. It was about restoring order, reclaiming identity, and demonstrating that meticulous action was mightier than any shouted confrontation. As the city lights flickered against the damp streets outside, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had shifted from reaction to proactive movement, from despair to strategy. This was the turning point, the moment where whispers would no longer suffice, where invisibility became power and patience transformed into precision. I had barely closed the call with Monica when a sense of unease settled over me, like a storm cloud refusing to pass. I knew that my family would try to counter our legal maneuvers, but nothing had prepared me for the depth of their duplicity. The moment I stepped into my apartment, the familiar scent of brewed coffee and faint traces of lavender from the diffuser didn't calm me. Instead, I felt every creak of the hardwood floor echoing like a warning. I placed my briefcase down and sat heavily at my desk, opening the ledger of documents that had become my armor over the past week. Tamara's messages had been benign on the surface, concerned questions, gentle nudges to take care and don't stress too much. But the details Monica uncovered shattered any illusion of trust. Every forwarded email, every screenshot of my private conversations, every casual "I'm worried about you" text had been a facade. She had been on my family's payroll, a silent operative within my circle. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the records, noting how cleverly my friend had inserted herself, offering help while feeding information to Cressida. My hands shook, not from fear, but from fury. When I confronted Tamara that evening, her eyes flitted nervously across the room of my apartment. I needed the money," she murmured. Her voice sounded weak, defensive, almost human, but the betrayal was as sharp as a knife. I didn't think it would matter. That was the problem. It mattered. Every word she had whispered, every secret she had passed along, mattered, and it had been weaponized against me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned away, leaving the door between us as a quiet wall. Irrevocable. 2 days later, I received the invitation to the family reconciliation dinner. The envelope was elegant, scented lightly with lavender, addressed in my mother's neat handwriting. It smelled harmless, almost soothing. I could almost hear their rehearsed smiles. The restaurant, a high-end establishment in downtown San Antonio, gleamed with soft chandeliers, polished silverware, and the hum of quiet conversations. My family waited at the table, their posture perfect, their expressions carefully curated. They were dressed to impress, to charm, to disarm, and I knew better. I had learned to see beneath the surface. The dinner began with polite conversation, wine glasses clinking, compliments on my hair, my attire, my strength for enduring recent events. Then, as casually as a breeze, they mentioned the lawsuit. A folder slid across the table with deliberate nonchalance. "Let's move on," my mother said sweetly. "Sign this, and we'll split everything 50-50. The folder's contents were perfectly disguised, a waiver cleverly crafted to strip me of legal rights under the guise of familial reconciliation. I opened the folder slowly, eyes scanning each line, each clause meticulously designed to sound benign. I didn't flinch. I didn't react emotionally. Instead, I leaned back slightly and said, "You always underestimated how much I read. I suggest you do the same." My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of every hour spent analyzing documents, every sleepless night strategizing, every moment I had reclaimed from the shadow of their deception. I closed the folder and tapped it twice, a subtle but deliberate act. I left it there on the table and turned my gaze back to my parents, to Cressida. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the kind that makes people shift in their seats. Whispers stirred among the nearby tables. Diners leaned slightly to catch a fragment of what had just passed. Cressida's lips pressed into a tight line, her eyes flashing with indignation and disbelief. "You're ungrateful," Cressida finally spat, her voice rising slightly. "You always have been paranoid." I stood up, steady, unyielding. The murmurs around us grew louder, curious glances and suppressed gasps filling the ambient hum of the restaurant. "You only call it paranoia when someone sees too clearly," I said, my voice ringing through the tension. Every syllable a declaration, every pause a claim to authority and self-worth. The air between us crackled. My mother's perfectly practiced smile faltered. My father's attempt at intimidation hung weakly in the background, insufficient against the quiet command I exuded. The moment had shifted. I was no longer a passive participant in their manipulation. I had become a force, a measured, strategic, unstoppable force. Night fell, and I returned to my apartment, the weight of the evening pressing against my shoulders. Rain streaked the windows once more, mirroring the streaks of anger and resolve coursing through me. I sank into my chair and examined the folder one last time before setting it in a secure lockbox labeled simply, "Truth." Minutes later, a soft knock at the door startled me. I glanced up to see my tires slashed outside, a folded note taped crudely to the windshield. My pulse surged, not with fear, but with clarity. The message was simple, direct. "Back off, bitch. You won't win." I held the note in my hand, feeling the paper crinkle between my fingers. They had crossed a line. This wasn't about documents or inheritance anymore. This was about intimidation, about testing how far I would bend before breaking. But I knew now, I would not break. I would not bend. Each calculated action, each quiet maneuver, had prepared me for this. And just as the threat sought to instill fear, it only sharpened my focus. I spent the remainder of the evening cataloging everything from the day, the interactions, the gestures, the subtle cues. Every detail was a puzzle piece, a pattern revealing their desperation and their underestimation of me. By midnight, I had compiled an extensive record, photographs of the damage, the note, security footage from nearby buildings, and detailed annotations of our dinner conversation, each piece a weapon of truth in the quiet war I was now leading. I finally paused, allowing myself a deep breath. The rain outside had softened to a gentle drizzle. The city lights reflected on the wet streets, an unbroken chain of illumination like the path I was now walking. I knew that from here on, nothing would be taken for granted. Every smile, every gesture, every promise would be examined through the lens of discernment I had sharpened over these past months. As I locked the documents in my safe, I whispered to myself, "Checkmate is coming." And this time, I'm calling the moves. My reflection in the darkened window stared back, unwavering, a quiet but resolute vow to myself and the truth I would uphold. The tension had been building all week, each passing day adding another layer of unease that I couldn't shake. I hadn't slept well, my mind a constant storm of calculations and anticipations. After the tire slashing incident, I realized the stakes weren't just legal, they were personal, and every corner of my life had become a battlefield. As the sun began its slow descent over San Antonio, casting amber light across the city streets, I gathered my notes, the flash drives, and the documents I'd meticulously compiled. Today, I was taking my story public. I arrived at the community town hall earlier than the award ceremony suggested, parking a few blocks away to avoid any unwanted attention. The town hall was buzzing with small business owners, city officials, and local media, all eager to recognize the achievements of families like mine. Or so it seemed. I lingered in the back, my laptop tucked under my arm like armor, and watched as people greeted each other with firm handshakes and wide smiles, oblivious to the storm that was about to unfold. When the announcer called for applause for Cressida Monroe for outstanding family business leadership, the room erupted. I felt a familiar sting, my chest tightening as memories of endless weekends spent running the store and late nights organizing accounts washed over me. My grandmother had always whispered, "Your hard work won't be forgotten." But here, under the fluorescent lights of a crowded hall, it felt invisible. Then came the moment of opportunity. "Anyone from the Monroe family who would like to speak?" The mic floated to the center of the stage, and I stepped forward, heart hammering, not with fear, but with determination. I connected my phone to the projector system, hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The crowd quieted, curious eyes turning toward me. The video began to play. My grandmother's frail voice filled the room, recorded from her hospital bed just weeks before she passed. "Lumen deserves it all. She gave up her life for us. This is my last wish." Her eyes, clear and full of intention, met mine across the screen. Gasps rippled through the audience, whispers swelling into murmurs of disbelief. I waited for the murmurs to settle, then projected the side-by-side documents. The discrepancies were undeniable: tampered signatures, missing beneficiaries, misallocated funds. Each piece of evidence told the story of my erasure, a quiet campaign to minimize my existence while elevating Cressida. I held the mic close and let the words fall with deliberate force. "You don't inherit loyalty by stealing legacy." The room fell silent, every eye fixed on me, every heartbeat in rhythm with mine. Cressida's face twisted with shock and fury. She stepped forward, voice rising as she declared, "This video is fake! You're making this up!" Her words were sharp, but they carried no weight against the truth laid bare on the screen. I held the microphone calmly, the calm of a storm eye. "You can challenge it in court. I'll be there," I replied, measured, unflinching. The crowd's reaction was electric. Slow claps began, hesitant at first, then growing until the hall was filled with the sound of recognition and support. A few attendees shuffled out in disgust, their expressions condemning the deceit, while others leaned in, sympathy and admiration etched on their faces. I watched as Cressida's composure cracked, her carefully maintained mask unraveling under the weight of truth. By the next morning, the retaliation had already begun. My car bore scratches along the side, my business's Yelp page flooded with fabricated one-star reviews. Monica's voice on the phone was calm, but urgent. "They're trying to paint you as unstable. Stay off social media. We're filing protection." But I didn't flinch. Each act of sabotage only confirmed that my fight was necessary and that their fear was real. I spent the rest of the day compiling reports, video stills, and transcripts from the event, ensuring that every shred of evidence was backed up in multiple formats. The mic drop moment at the town hall wasn't just about vindication, it was about laying the foundation for the final confrontation, showing that the truth could not be ignored, and that deception had limits. That evening, a manila envelope arrived at my apartment, delivered without ceremony. Inside was a court summons. My family had filed a defamation lawsuit. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of every calculated move that had led to this moment. I knew that this wasn't an end. It was a crucible, a test of how far I was willing to go to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I sat by the window, the city lights twinkling against the darkening sky. Each reflection on the glass seemed to echo the path I had traveled: betrayal, loss, resilience, and now confrontation. I allowed myself a brief moment to breathe, to let the significance of the grandmother's video and the public support sink in. This was my inheritance of truth, of legacy, and of justice. In that quiet reflection, I realized the journey ahead was about more than money or property. It was about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, and my story. The family's attempt to control the narrative had failed spectacularly. They had underestimated the determination of the girl they once dismissed. I looked around my apartment At the stacks of documents, the flash drives, the photos, each piece a testament to resilience. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready. No longer the overlooked youngest daughter, no longer the silent helper, I was prepared to face every scheme, every lie, every intimidation tactic they would deploy. I was armed not with anger, but with evidence, strategy, and unwavering resolve. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of my apartment, casting long shadows across the floor where stacks of documents and flash drives lay scattered. I had spent hours the night before, meticulously organizing everything: copies of emails, bank statements, screenshots of tampered documents, and witness statements from Gabriel Ortiz. Each piece felt like a brick in the fortress I was building around the truth. I knew that today wasn't just another step in the legal process. It was the culmination of years of betrayal, erasure, and careful observation. By mid-morning, I had dressed in simple, professional attire, a navy blouse and tailored slacks, and packed the final binders into my leather briefcase. Driving through the familiar streets of San Antonio, I rehearsed in my mind the opening statements I would make, the calm, factual tone that would leave no room for manipulation. I glanced at the courthouse ahead, its stone facade intimidating yet grounding, and felt a strange clarity settle over me. This was the arena where the final confrontation would take place. I entered the Bexar County Civil Court, the weight of anticipation pressing against my chest. Monica was already inside, seated at the defense table with an array of folders, binders, and her usual composed demeanor. I greeted her with a nod, my eyes scanning the courtroom where my family sat, father in his immaculate suit, mother attempting a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes, and Cressida radiating the same air of arrogance that had marked her throughout my life. They were ready to perform, but I was ready to dismantle the illusion. The opening arguments began with my family's attorney, articulating a narrative designed to paint me as vengeful and deceitful. Every word, every inflection was calibrated to sow doubt. But I remained silent, listening, absorbing, knowing that the weight of truth was on my side. Monica leaned over, whispering, "Stay calm. Let them paint their story. Yours is already documented." Then came Gabriel Ortiz, the whistleblower from inside the family company. He took the stand with a calm resolve that mirrored my own. He recounted, in meticulous detail, the payments made to ensure documents were altered, the internal messages in which Cressida referred to me as expendable, and the audio clip of her stating, "She'll sign it. We'll gaslight her like we always do." The courtroom held its breath as the recording played, the silence afterward heavier than any accusation could be. When my turn came, I rose from my seat and approached the stand. My hands were steady, my voice clear. I spoke not with rage, but with controlled conviction. I detailed my sacrifices, the years I had dedicated to running the family store, the countless nights spent managing accounts while my siblings traveled, the silent labor that had been stripped from me, the digital erasure of my identity in every facet of the family business. Holding up a framed photograph of my grandmother and me, I addressed the judge directly. "All I ever wanted was to be part of something that wouldn't hurt me," I said, my voice carrying the weight of lived experience, of injustice, and of relentless determination. The room was quiet, the judge attentive, the jury rapt with the authenticity of my words. As the proceedings continued, evidence after evidence was presented: the original will, the tampered documents, the bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, and the digital logs confirming every misdeed. Each revelation further solidified the narrative of calculated betrayal, demonstrating not just emotional or financial manipulation, but a systematic effort to erase my existence from the family legacy. Finally, the judge leaned back, considering the weight of the evidence and testimony. The gavel struck, and in that moment, a profound sense of relief mingled with the lingering sting of what had been lost. The court ruled unequivocally in my favor. My name was reinstated on the estate, financial restitution was ordered, and Cressida was to be investigated for perjury and document fraud. My family sat stunned, their carefully curated facade crumbling in real time. I left the courthouse with Monica by my side, the afternoon sun warm against my face. Each step felt lighter, Yet I carried the memory of every slight, every moment of invisibility, every betrayal. We stopped at a nearby church, its wooden doors inviting and its stained glass windows casting colorful patterns on the pews. I sat alone, absorbing the quiet, reflecting on the magnitude of the victory. The reality settled in. Justice had been served, but the cost was undeniable. Relationships fractured beyond repair, trust irrevocably broken. I whispered to myself, I won, but I still lost something I can never get back. The words weren't sorrowful, they were reflective, a quiet acknowledgement of the complexity of triumph when it intersects with personal history. As the evening shadows lengthened and the city lights began to shimmer, I allowed myself a moment of contemplation. My grandmother's legacy had been honored, my own efforts recognized, but the journey toward healing, toward reclaiming the peace I had been denied for so long, was only beginning. Outside, the streets hummed with life, oblivious to the personal battles that had unfolded within their midst. Yet within me, a sense of equilibrium, hard-earned and deliberate, began to take root. The sunlight fell gently over my backyard garden, illuminating the rows of vibrant blooms and the small vegetable patches I had nurtured over the past months. Each plant felt like a marker of survival, growth, and quiet triumph. I could hear the faint hum of bees moving from flower to flower, their tiny wings brushing against the petals, a rhythm of life, ordinary yet profoundly comforting. I knelt to adjust the soil around a tomato plant, feeling the earth crumble lightly between my fingers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled without tension. The transition from chaos to this stillness hadn't been simple. The courtroom battle, the public confrontations, the painstaking process of reclaiming my inheritance, it all had left traces of fatigue and weariness in my posture and my eyes. Yet the garden, my small sanctuary, offered a reminder that growth didn't require a stage, applause, or validation. It only required patience, attention, and care. I hummed softly to myself, a tune that had been lodged in my memory from childhood mornings when my grandmother tended to her own roses, her hands steady, her heart open. As I watered the rows of newly sprouted marigolds, a letter slid under the garden gate. I paused, sensing the familiar weight of inked paper in my hand. Turning it over, I read the brief note from my father. "We're still family. Your mother's sick." There was no apology, no reflection on past mistakes, just a factual acknowledgement of illness and family ties. I folded the letter carefully, placing it atop the small wooden bench near the garden shed. I didn't cry, didn't feel the old ache of seeking approval or validation. Instead, I felt a subtle, enduring understanding. Family doesn't always change, and sometimes closure comes not from reconciliation, but from self-preservation. Later that morning, I met Monica at a cafe just a few blocks away. The scent of roasted coffee beans mingled with the low chatter of patrons, creating a comforting soundtrack to the conversation we were about to have. We ordered our drinks, her customary black coffee, mine a lightly sweetened latte, and found a quiet corner by the window. "Most people think justice looks like revenge," Monica said, stirring her cup thoughtfully, "but yours looked like freedom." Her words hung in the air, a gentle validation that the path I had chosen, painstaking and sometimes lonely, had been the right one. I nodded, tracing the rim of my cup with my fingers. "I didn't want them destroyed. I just wanted them out of my head," I replied softly, my voice steady. There was a weight lifted in that simple statement, a sense of ownership over my life that no court ruling or legal document could fully capture. The weeks that followed were dedicated to building my own path. I launched a small consulting business aimed at helping women entrepreneurs rebuild after financial or professional setbacks. Each client I guided reminded me of my own journey, the resilience it takes to reclaim one's life, and the quiet courage needed to confront systems that undervalue and manipulate. My days were filled with meetings, workshops, and one-on-one coaching sessions, each interaction a step further from the shadow of my family's betrayal and closer to the light of purposeful independence. Evenings were reserved for reflection and restoration. I tended to the garden, cooked meals that nourished both body and mind, and occasionally took long walks through the neighborhoods of San Antonio, observing families, couples, and friends going about ordinary lives with their own complexities and hidden struggles. It reminded me that peace wasn't a destination, but a series of deliberate choices made day by day. One evening, as the sky turned amber and the cicadas began their evening chorus, I hosted a small dinner in my home. Only a few close friends attended, my chosen family, the people who had supported me through uncertainty and cheered my small victories. We toasted quietly, their faces warm with genuine affection. One friend lifted her glass and said, "To the one who taught us how to leave and how to stay whole." I smiled fully, without reserve. The years of betrayal, manipulation, and loss had left scars, but they hadn't defined me. They had shaped a resilience, an ability to discern, and a capacity for measured compassion. I realized then that family wasn't always blood, and closure didn't require approval from those who refused to see truth. Days later, I returned to my grandmother's grave. The sun filtered through the tall oaks, dappled light playing across the headstone. I knelt, placing the framed photo of us together that I had carried through the court battles. Gently, I whispered, "I kept my promise. I stayed kind, but not quiet." The act was simple, unceremonious, yet profoundly liberating. It signified an acknowledgement of pain, a respect for my own boundaries, and the choice to continue moving forward without carrying the burden of past injustices. The air was quiet, except for the gentle rustle of leaves. No applause, no external acknowledgement, just the silent testimony of survival and personal integrity. I stood, taking one last look at the grave, then turned toward the garden and the home I had built for myself. Each step was deliberate, unhurried, a rhythm that mirrored the life I had fought to reclaim. Sometimes peace doesn't come with fanfare or recognition. It arrives quietly, in the form of choice, the decision to stop bleeding for people who take it as entertainment, to nurture a life that honors oneself, and to cultivate relationships that reflect respect, trust, and mutual care. In the stillness, I understood that the war had ended not with destruction, but with wisdom and dignity, and that true victory was in the life I now had the courage to shape. As we close this chapter of Lumen's story, one thing becomes clear. Standing up for yourself, even against those you love, is a form of strength, not betrayal. Family isn't always about blood, it's about respect, honesty, and boundaries. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping family stories that make you question, reflect, and feel every moment.